Why isn't it? Again?
Which one was yours?
Starting tomorrow? I know. I just cannot believe it now.
Thank you.
This is the August 15, 2023 meeting of the Woodstock Community Unit School District 200 Board of Education. Please rise for the pledge of allegiance. Flag in the back and the flag behind us. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Dr. Bidwell?
Here.
Dr. Ferris?
Present.
Mr. Gilmore?
Here.
Mr. Headley?
Here.
Mr. Homo?
Here.
Mr. Maselli? Mr. Parisi?
Here. Okay, first item on our agenda tonight is our consent agenda. Consent agenda is you had a chance to look through that. Do any members of the board wish to pull any items from the consent agenda? There's also a personnel agenda, so please take a look through that. So when you're ready, I would entertain a motion with respect to the consent agenda.
Move to waive the reading of and approve the consent agenda as printed in the board agenda, including the August 15, 2023 personnel agenda.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Parisi, seconded by Dr. Bidwell. Roll call, please.
Mr. Parisi?
Yes.
Dr. Bidwell?
Yes.
Mr. Homo?
Yes.
Mr. Headley?
Yes.
Dr. Ferris?
Yes.
Mr. Gilmore?
Yes. Okay, then the next item of business is our recognition.
School starts till tomorrow. We're very excited to honor last spring art show winners. April 3rd through May 2nd, at the Woodstock Public Library, that hosted our district tournament spring art show. And back there, we have our winning pieces. So we want to honor our winners and also our teachers who are back here to thank them for their amazing work throughout the year.
Okay. There's a suggested motion on page 123 of the materials.
Move to introduce the following resolution. Whereas the Board of Education of Woodstock Community Unit School District 200 wishes to recognize the contributions of these individuals, and whereas District 200 has benefited as a result of these accomplishments, now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Education of Woodstock Community Unit School District 200 hereby bestows special recognition and a certificate of achievement on behalf of the citizens of the district.
Motion by Dr. Bidwell. Do we have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Headley. Roll call, please.
Dr. Bidwell?
Yes.
Mr. Headley?
Yes.
Dr. Ferris?
Yes.
Mr. Parisi?
Yes.
Mr. Homo?
Yes.
Mr. Gilmore?
Yes.
All right, so for each winner, we're going to call your name. You can come up here, get your certificate, shake our hands, and then we'll stay here for one big picture at the end. First, we have from Clay Academy, Josh Vetter. Creekside, Brianna Kowalski. From Dean Street, Jocelyn J. From Greenwood, Kate McDowell. From Mary Andrews, Avery Thornton. From Northwood, Jacqueline Hernandez. From Olson, Gia Daly. From Prairiewood, this is actually the superintendent's award, so it'll hang in the district office. Braden Ferreira. From Prairiewood, Sophia Codinas Catello. From Westwood, Fiona Sabateri. From Woodstock High School, Elise Raymond. From Woodstock North, Franco Reyes. Right, dead in the middle. Right, just move a little bit, so right in the middle. So I come take a picture of the parents, come on out, wherever you want, get close for a picture if you'd like. We'll keep them up there if everyone gets time to snap a picture.
If I had to take a picture, you want to
Couple more, hold on. Big round of applause for all of our council
Okay, we're going to move on into our communications portion. Communications are a time for community members and district employees to express a point of view and anticipate an issue. There's a sign-up sheet for the public to identify their name, address, phone number, name of organization represented, if any, and a brief description of the topic to be addressed. Comments are generally limited to 3 minutes in accordance with board policy 2:230 and are otherwise governed by board policy 2:230. Anyone sign up for the sheet to speak?
There were none.
Are there any members of the general public who wish to address the board at this time? Any members of the public? Are there any staff comments? Board comments? Next item is our superintendent report.
Yes. Oh, if I did,
All right. We're really excited to start the first day of school. And, you know, the last couple weeks we've been getting at full speed. Last week we had all of our new staff on Thursday and Friday. Carl gave a welcome address at lunch, which we appreciate. Yesterday and today we had all of our staff back. Carl gave a nice welcome to all staff yesterday. I appreciate that as well. and there's a lot of great energy and excitement throughout the district as we're in the building Woodstock. So we just can't wait to have our kids back tomorrow and get going. Another great school year. I think one new aspect of the school year was our link crew at each high school. So we had freshman orientation today at both schools, and the link crew of junior and senior students who serve as kind of tour guide / student ambassador for incoming freshmen. It's a great way to help freshmen transition to high school. We really make sure that our link crew groups look like our student body. I think that's important. When we come, we have ambassadors and people lead that represent our whole student body. So Jen Spear at North and John Lacey at Woodstock High both did a great job leading that. I don't know if Art or Josh any comments on that? That would go
Students really enjoyed it, both the leaders and the freshmen. A lot of positive feedback on it. The staff are excited to see all the stage. It was great.
Yeah, I would just add, besides that, the effort continues throughout the year. These freshmen then have some connections already with some of our student leaders in the building, which is really exciting.
Yeah, so it's more than just that one day. It is throughout the year they kind of check in and make sure they have that mentor relationship, which is really trying to get going across the board. So just really excited about the start today. We had both high schools. Great job by both high school staff on that, and Justin being a big part of that as well. I want to follow from our bus discussion at our last meeting and say, that was Mike Freeman, and he ran us through some numbers and situations, so I just want to give some feedback. There was a question about the area, that kind of far northern, western, rural areas. It was quicker than Anderson Westwood. When they ran through our system, there's really not, without creating more routes, there's no advantage one way or the other from the computer models on that. And we did have to Dr. Biddle's question about, that optimum time, and we would need at least 27 more drivers. And we have to, I was way off. That's why I ran number, right? I told you, I would spitball in there, so I probably shouldn't do that.
I'll take that as a win.
Yeah. We've cut it down considerably, actually. It's good news, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, but I think, even talking to the president of the bus driver union out there too, I don't think it's an untable goal. I don't think it is right now. But I think as we grow and as conditions change, we start getting more drivers. I think that is the goal to kind of get back online. When can we make a push and get that? So just to kind of report back on a couple of things we talked about last time.
Thank you for following those things and for informing us what you found out. Okay, the next item on our agenda then is our unfinished business, and our unfinished business is our bullying committee update.
All right, so two big things today. One, we've got a video. Sorry, Mr. Doyle, because he had done this before at Creekside, so we volunteered him to be part of the video. And this is a video that once we get feedback from the board, we plan on sending out to all of our parents. Just it takes you'll see it takes you through the step-by-step process of reporting incidents to each of our buildings. So Justin, we're going to play.
On behalf of District 200, I'm going to walk you through our new District 200 bullying form. The form is available to all students and parents in District 200. It can be used to report any issues with bullying. Students and parents can fill out the form with their names or leave it anonymous. The form will be located on the District 200 website under the Parent and Student drop-downs. The QR code will be posted in hallways for students to scan. Once the form is filled out, the principal and an additional staff member, the assistant principal or social worker, will receive a copy. Administration at each building will take each report seriously and conduct a full investigation, which includes interviewing all parties involved, reviewing evidence, and gathering as much information as possible. Families of those involved will be communicated with, and all necessary steps will be taken to make sure any negative behavior is immediately addressed. Once the situation has been thoroughly addressed, school personnel will continue to monitor the situation with drop-ins, phone calls home, and other forms of check-ins. We are excited to implement this reporting form as yet another tool to address the negative impact of bullying and to keep the safety of all students first. If you have any questions, please reach out to your child's school administration.
So that's the video, we'll take any feedback on that, and then as well, we've got, this will go home as a s'mores, so very similar to the way we're hanging some buildings too. We've just got that QR code so you can scan quick through the parent or students in the building, to report any kind of issues. So we're open to, and Kevin shot the video too, appreciate Kevin's help on that. I'll take any feedback from the board.
Questions or comments?
Did you say these flyers will get sent home as well as?
Yeah, so this will hang in the building, and there's a s'more, which is real similar information that I'll send out, tomorrow, next day, if the board's okay with the video.
With the QR code too?
Yeah, the whole that. Yeah, the QR code is on the s'more.
We could put it on there, the link's gonna be in there anyway.
The link's
Right.
on
The
there?
link's in
The
there.
QR code would just take you to the link.
Okay, as long as the link is.
Yeah, the link will be on there.
Any questions? Comments? Well, I think it's terrific that we're doing this, and I thank Keely and Rob for running the program and running the committee, and all of the committee who were on it that helped come up with, investigate what was going on. What I like about the video is it kind of does explain that it's not just one person making the decision, and that there are other people involved, and that what you do once the complaint is made, that it's important for you to understand. I'm not sure I know a lot of people do understand it. The only question I have with it is, it doesn't suggest what happens if a parent wants to follow up at all, other than say call your school administration. It doesn't have anything that says, you know, if you feel that action is not adequate, you can reach out further, or what you can do from that point forward. That's the only thing that I would maybe want to see included in the video. Otherwise, I think the video itself is fine the way it is. Maybe it's, you know, another editor is doing that, maybe update it a little bit more. But I think it's a good video, and I think I think the two steps that we've taken are the right direction.
The QR code is in the s'more too, I just checked, to make sure.
Anything else? We don't need to vote on this.
No, just
informational so that we know what's happening with it. And this will go out in the next couple of days?
Yeah, end of the week for sure.
Okay, great, that's good.
And then Michelle talked, we'll bring data back throughout the years, and how many incidents we're getting reported and things like that, just so you have an idea.
Would any board members like to see anything else other than that, or do you think that's adequate? Okay. Well, again, thank you to those involved in helping put this together, and we'll see what the data brings this time with us. Okay, that's the end of our unfinished business then. We'll move on to our...
I think we might have an art show winner show up, right? Is that okay with honor? Of course. The 18th Street, right? From Dean Street, You can come right up, come on, take a picture. Great job, John. Great job.
Okay, we're going to move on to our new business then. First item of new business is discussion on the debt management and refunding plan.
Jen's with us, PMA, she's going to walk us through our overall debt and some ideas they have.
Yes, thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. It's great to see you all again. I know it's been almost a full year since I've been here, and I apologize. The best art I can do is in the form of graphs and teeny tiny numbers on charts, but there are some colors in them, so I guess that's something. Anyway, tonight we want to give you a brief market update and then revisit sort of the overall debt picture and talk a little more in depth about some potential refunding opportunities that we alluded to last fall. So first up is the market update. We have a chart on the next slide, which is the MMD, or Municipal Market Data Index. This is the index off of which tax-exempt municipal bonds price. So in the background, the gray shaded area, that's the Fed funds rate. And as you can see over the last year or so, as you know, just from listening to the news, the Fed has continued to increase that rate. The lines on this chart represent that MMD index that I mentioned. The light blue line at the bottom represents the 1-year rate, and then it goes all the way up to the 20-year rate that's represented by the green line. So generally, what the Fed decides to do tends to impact the short-term 1-year rate most closely. They're almost lockstep throughout the 20-year history that's represented by this chart. Long-term rates are impacted by a whole host of other factors. Most recently, that has been inflation expectations. And in fact, today we had a good retail sales report come out, and that positive news caused bond rates to go up another 5 basis points, or 0.05%. And that really has been the story with almost every piece of economic data that has come out over the last year or so. And then, over the course of 20 years, you see these peaks and valleys. The most recent peaks are circled and identified here by what precipitated them. So back in March of 2020, we had spikes in the bond market due to the onset of the COVID pandemic in the United States. And then most recently, it's really been this historic inflation that we've been experiencing. Now, the good news with this historical perspective is that even though rates have certainly gone up and have continued to increase since those low points in 2020 and most of 2021, the 10-year rate, for example, which is that dark blue line, is not actually much higher than its 20-year average. So overall, that 1-year rate has come up pretty significantly, but most of the longer-term rates are just fluctuating right around their historical averages lately. Okay. So looking at the next slide, this is the same information, but it's just zooming in a little bit more recently. So it begins with January of 2020. So you can see that since October of 22, when we last met, rates have actually come down a little bit, but they've been somewhat volatile, just responding, whether it's positively or negatively, to those economic reports that have been coming out. What's interesting, if you look all the way to the right, is you can see that that light blue line, which represents the 1-year rate, is almost as high as the 20-year, whereas the 5 and 10-year, which are those kind of medium shades of blue, those lines are below the 1-year rate. And that's because that yield curve is inverted, which is great for investing, but a little bit interesting if you need to borrow money in the bond market. It's a little bit of an unusual situation that we find ourselves in. But again, we have come down a bit from those initial peaks about a year ago. So looking at the existing debt levies, of the district going forward. Just a reminder for what all these different colors of these columns mean. This chart is depicting the total debt service, so principal and interest payments for the district's outstanding debt. The green portions of the columns, that is your non-referendum debt service. So you do have 2 series of limited bonds, and they're called limited bonds because the annual levy on non-referendum debt can't exceed your debt service extension base, or DSIP, and that's represented by the red line here on this chart. So you see there is some capacity if you were to have a non-referendum borrowing need down the road. The blue portions of the columns, which are the bulk of the outstanding payments of the district, those are all referring back to originally referendum-approved debt. And so for levy year 22, which is for tax bills that were collected this year, you see this light blue shaded portion at the top that represents about $5 million. That was the abatement that was applied toward levy year 22 so that the district was able to stick to its objective of having no more than $8 million bond levies annually. Going forward in 2023 and 2024, those are the final 2 peak years of debt service. So we've shaded kind of a striped portion of the columns all the way at the top. For 2023, that shaded portion of the column represents $13.7 million. In 2024, that portion that's above $8 million is about $14.5 million. For now, we're assuming that the district will abate down those payments. That is very likely, it seems, for 2023. And then for 2024, the deadline to affect that levy is in early 2025. So around this time, or perhaps a little later in the fall next year, we can revisit that final abatement and discuss if that's something the district wants to do, depending on what your fund balance is at that point in time. If there needs to be a small taxable restructuring and a slightly smaller abatement, we can figure all that out. And
just so we're all on the same page real quick, what would have to happen? 'Cause I think our plan has been, and I know that's not talking through, right, that we'd love to use fund balance, pay both those monsters, that payments off, and just be done with the rest of our referendum and bills, right? What situation would have to happen for that second year for you to advise us to do something different, you think?
Sure. Well, certainly unforeseen expenditures between now and then, but I think we would examine with administration first and then with the full board, what are your fund balances as a percentage of expenditures? Because one thing we want to preserve is the district has a really strong credit rating of a AA from S&P. And they do have some metrics for fund balance reserves that they take a look at, and to the extent that you're falling below those.
Is it 25% or more?
I would say it's more like 30% would be a good target, assuming everything else remains very strong as well. But fund balance reserves are a big factor that go into that credit rating, so we would really want to examine that before, moving forward with a full abatement in 24.
Thank you.
So on the next page, we've got the numbers that support that chart. You know they're very tiny, so I'm going to walk you through them as best as I can, and hopefully you have this in front of you, or you don't. Okay, so here's the big picture. It's really represented by that chart we just looked at, but the yellow highlighted year here is levy year 22 for tax bills collected this year. The green numbers highlighted toward the right of this represent the net levies, and we are projecting abatements as shown on that chart that we just looked at for the next 2 years to bring down the debt levies for 2023 and 2024 to $8 million. And again, those peaks in debt service in 2023 and 2024 are a result of the capital appreciation bonds that the district had issued pursuant to referendum back in 2006. Those payments for the next 2 years, just on those capital appreciation bonds or CABs, are $18 million and $19 million respectively. And your other outstanding debt really does not have much principal in those years. So again, the only way to handle those peaks is either by abating with fund balance or doing a taxable restructuring. Taxable because those capital appreciation bonds are not callable prior to maturity. Okay. So those payments here are boxed in orange. In purple, we've highlighted the 2014 bond payments. Now those are callable beginning in January of 2024. And we'll talk a little bit more about what we can do about those payments, but I wanted to include this here in particular because I wanted to point out that for the next 2 years, those 2014 bonds, they don't have any principal payments. So if the board were to pursue overfunding, and I'll show you what that could look like in a moment, if the board wanted to do that, it won't really put much of a dent into those next 2 years. What it would do is create capacity in the future, and we can talk about how that can be helpful to the district should you want to pursue it. Okay.
Hey Jen, can I interrupt you for 1 second?
Yes.
I just emailed you all a copy of this presentation, so if you look at your Board of Ed email, you'll see that so you can see the small print.
Thank you. Okay. So on slide 8 of the presentation, this is just showing the outstanding principal. So this is taking out the interest payments, just looking at the par amount or the principal amount of the outstanding bonds. So highlighted in blue here, these are the 2013 bonds. They have been callable since January of 2022. However, the rate you're paying on those is just above 3%. And so in the current market environment, there's still no opportunity to save any money with those bonds. The 2014 bonds, again highlighted in purple here, as you can see, there's no principal payments for the next couple of years. Those principal payments that you might have the possibility of refunding don't start until fiscal year 27. That corresponds with levy year 2025, so just after those peak years of debt service. But the call date, again, on those 2014 bonds is in January of 2024, and the IRS allows you to refund bonds with a prepayment date like this up to 90 days in advance of that call date. So that would mean that any refunding of this series could close as early as mid-October. So we're right in that window of time to really consider whether the district may want to pursue a refunding of those bonds. So some details on those 2014 bonds. There is about $19.3 million of principal outstanding that is callable. And right now, the average rate that's being paid out on those is just over 5%, hence the opportunity for savings. So on slide 10, this is the savings estimate if you were to pursue a current refunding on a tax-exempt basis of those 2014 bonds. So for each bond payment year that ends on January 15th, corresponding with all those dates on the left-hand column, we show new debt service. That is our estimate of what the debt payments on the refunding bonds would be. You compare that to one column over where it says old debt service. Those are your existing, your current payments on the 2014 bonds. And the difference between the two is your savings for each of those years, and that's what's highlighted in yellow on the right. So as you can see, those first 2 years, those savings are not as great as in the future years. That's just, those are interest payments, so it's really dependent on what interest payments you receive on the refunding bonds. This is our best estimate for what those savings might look like, so something around $85,000 or so per year. Again, not really putting a dent into those peak debt service years. The benefit comes after those. So you can see beginning with the third year of savings, it's around $215,000 of savings annually. This is assuming current market rates, and this is net of any cost of issuance related to the new bonds. So this $1.88 million of total savings you see in that highlighted column, it's not that you save that and then have to pay various transaction costs. Those are already netted off the number. So this would be your true savings on the levy for taxpayers. Okay. The net present value benefit of that $1.88 million is about $1.5 million. And another way to express that is as a percentage of the amount of bonds that you're refunding, which is at $19.3 million. And the percentage of present value savings would be 7.75%. Now, rates have just been trending upward this month, so we wanted to give you an idea of sensitivity since we wouldn't be able to turn around and sell bonds tomorrow. There would be, at least several weeks of time before we could do that if you told me that you were interested in proceeding. So the sensitivity with this refunding is that for each 0.1% or 10 basis points of movement in rates, that equates to approximately $125,000 of present value savings. So if rates go up by that 0.1%, we would expect savings to be lower by about $125,000. Conversely, if they go down by the time we would sell the bonds, then your savings would go up by approximately that amount. So to give you an idea what that looks like, going back to the graph of existing debt service, on this chart, the gray area in the back is your current debt service payments. And the columns here represent the new payments if you were to pursue this refunding. So again, the benefit of this particular refunding is really concentrated in levy years 2025 through 2032. If you look closely, you can see those new payments are just a little bit lower than what you have outstanding now, to the tune of about $215,000 per year. So again, it's not addressing those next two peak years. At least not by very much, just at 85,000 or so. But this refunding would provide additional capacity going forward to either more quickly pay down a taxable restructuring if you decide next year that that's something you'd like to use in order to take care of that second or that final peak year of debt service, and or it could allow you to restructure future debt payments down the road and pay those off more quickly. So for example, what's circled in yellow here on this chart, those are the bulk of the payments due on your 2021A and 2021B bonds. Those also have a prepayment date, a call date, which is in 2030. So at that point in time, you could accelerate those payments. You wouldn't even have to remain in the footprint. You could pay those off more quickly in this capacity that you can see in levy years 2025 through 2033. So it would allow you to reduce the debt burden and pay off bonds even more rapidly.
We can do that whether we refinance or not, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
The refinancing would just give you an extra, 1.88 million of capacity in those middle years. Is that me? I'm sorry.
People look for it.
Okay. Any questions on the refunding numbers?
Anybody have any questions or comments about the funding?
So what's the interest rate today?
Sure. So the interest rate in this refinancing scenario is about 3.55%. That's the true interest cost.
And if it goes up at what point? I mean, because you're talking about if it goes up between now and our first September meeting, we lose value in the refunding, right?
Yes, to the tune of, for every 0.1%, it's about 125,000
Okay.
that it would fluctuate. So speaking of timing,
No, I have a question about this. Very much. Just to summarize this, make sure I understand what you're saying. What it sounds like you're saying is that by refunding in the manner you're speaking of, that we could, without extending the time frame or the debt payments that we're already making, without extending those, maybe we could jiggle them around a little bit, but without extending them, we could save up about $2 million a year. Is that about right?
not per year in total. So it's about 200,000 per year.
But still, we would be looking at extending this
Correct.
structure
No
beyond
extension
what we already had.
That's right. We're within the footprint of those 2014 bonds. It's like refinancing your mortgage, but over the same term. So you're not extending it. It's just you're 15 years into a 30-year mortgage, and you refinance for the last 15 years, not extending it, just lower payments.
Any other questions on this so far? Thanks.
So,
I'm sorry, I feel like one second. If we go through funding bonds at this time, with respect to those years, do we lock ourselves in a way that we would be able to take advantage of better rates in the future?
on those particular bonds, that's correct. Now, there's a trade-off here because the bonds are callable in January, and as you go past and beyond that call date, your opportunity cost for those savings goes down. Your opportunity for savings goes down. So, it's what happens after mid-January. So let's say you do want to wait and see where rates go. Beyond January, the savings would, all else being equal, start going down because you're not refunding those bonds as early as you can from their actual maturity dates. So if you take it to the extreme, you could wait all the way up until the very final maturity and only refund that one. You just wouldn't be able to save very much without rates coming down even more.
What happens if the rates, the Fed rate, for example, which everything seems to be tied to, the Fed rate starts to come down, which is not an unrealistic expectation, but it's pretty high right now. So what if it were to come down? I mean, how would that impact us in terms of what we might have given up or what we might achieve?
Well, the timing of that, I agree that it seems like at some point they will be doing that. When they do that is a big question mark, of course. Right now we have a lot of Fed members saying that they're not ready to even talk about it. They're not even ready to talk about stabilizing the rate yet. It's anticipated that when they meet September 19th and 20th, they're going to raise it again. The issue is what will longer term rates do, because this refunding goes out about 10 years. And so we are certainly interested in what the Fed does, more so with what they say they're going to do going forward, because this refunding in that 5 to 10 year range is really sensitive to inflation expectations. So what the Fed says they see over the horizon for the next few years in their notes after they have the meeting is really what's going to impact the rates for this refunding, more so than what they do, what action they take.
So what happens if the rates come down? You kind of dance around it. What happens if they come down?
Yeah.
Fed rate comes down.
Sure. So if, again, longer term rates are not directly tied to what the Fed does. There's a whole host of things that could happen, including geopolitical things. You know, the situation with Ukraine gets worse, then all of this is out the window. But assuming none of that, nothing else changes to affect those long-term rates, then I would anticipate that municipal taxes and municipal rates would come down as well.
So if we want to wait there, we have until December, right? Before we lose most of the value and call the bond, or no?
Correct. So after January, you need rates to not just, you know, maintain, but actually come down to match the savings we're looking at now.
But between now, because I know September is before the Fed pays the rate again, we anticipate, right? But if you want to wait and gamble, then really December becomes our point at which we still capture most of the potential.
That's correct. I would only caution that as we approach December, the supply and demand in the municipal bond market tends to be pretty cyclical throughout the year, in that as we get closer to the holidays at the end of the year, a lot of investors start to drop out. So I would say if you were looking at, you know, the next few months in the short term of what to do, you know, proceed or wait, it can get interesting toward December.
So to that question, Jen, what would you recommend then? I mean, given the fact that we're in August, the call date is January, what do you recommend? What would be your recommendation?
Sure. So, well, let's take a look at just a sample timeline of the quickest we could possibly enter the market in the first place, and then talk about what the next steps could be. So if you decided that this is something you're interested in, not necessarily that, you know, you're ready to sell them right now, but just that something you would consider in the next 6 months or so, what I would suggest is that at the next meeting on September 12th, you consider adopting a parameters resolution, and that's what you've done in the past. It authorizes delegates to eventually approve a sale subject to certain parameters, including a maximum interest rate. In this case, there would also be a minimum amount of savings that the board would want those delegates to be able to authorize. And that parameters resolution, the authority is good for 6 months, so well beyond that mid-January call date. And that allows us to be really flexible with the sale date. The earliest we could enter the market, if that's what you decided you wanted to do, let's say on September 12th, you said, yes, let's go, let's have this sale tomorrow, which we could start gearing up for now, but we certainly wouldn't be committed to a mid-September sale until, you gave us the green light. We could be in the market as early as September 13th, which would be ahead of the next Fed meeting. So, it is possible that the notes that come out after that September meeting cause the market to go the wrong way for us, in which case getting ahead of it would be great. There are other economic reports that week, including September 13th, there's a CPI report. So it's very possible that this is our plan, but the morning of September 13th, the CPI report causes the market to react negatively, rates go up. Then I would recommend that we pull the districts for funding and not try to push it into the market that day. That parameters resolution gives us the flexibility to do that. But the bigger question of, do you try to do this in September or do you wait until November, December? I will say this. Earlier this year, I thought we might already be seeing rates coming down. And instead, we're kind of seeing the opposite. In fact, we had a really good CPI report last month, and the market still sold off. So it's not necessarily behaving the way we anticipate, even with the news we thought would cause rates to come down a little bit.
Any questions, or we start talking about just what we want to do going forward too?
entirely clear on which bonds you're talking about refunding by year. And then just highlight that.
Yep. So if we go back to, let's go to slide 7. Those are the existing debt service payments. So it's the 2014 bonds, those are highlighted in purple. So there is no principal there in the next 2 years are those peak debt service amounts. The payments that would be refunded begin in levy year 2025 and go through 2032.
So
Year 24 to 34, right?
Yeah, so it's the series 2014 bonds, and it's levy year 25 through 2032 that would be affected.
okay, so it's one set of bonds that you're talking about refinancing.
Correct. Yes. There's only one series that's callable.
And that was 2014, is that?
Yes.
So we could bring back a proposal, if number you have in mind, we could do that too. You know, if you pass or if you don't want to do it at all, we can do that. If you want to do it, no matter what, we can do that. Or if you want to have a number in mind, like a number of savings or something like that, we could pass them. If it hits, we take it. If it doesn't, we don't. I mean, whatever you want to do there, we can bring something back into September meeting. Or nothing at all. I mean, just, you know, could have been out just so you see that, you know what we're doing. They thought we could save a little money, so that was a good conversation, but if you choose not to, obviously it's not an incredible amount of money. So CPI comes back in September, lower that.
It should. It didn't last month, but that seems like an anomaly.
Okay.
My only question is, this is the first I've seen this. And so, how long have we been considering this?
And so this would be the earliest you could consider doing it, because we cannot execute and close on a revolving
No,
credit.
I meant, how long have we known that we might want to approach something like this? So good, I would like, if I'm going to ask you to look at this and say, should we do this? And I'm like, well, I'd like.
Well, we're not asking you to do it though, we're asking you to want to see it again. And the only, yeah, she came to us last month, the last month was great, he did a self-review, we didn't want to bring her then, so that was the first real conversation we had about it, but it just didn't work.
That's where I'm at, I'd like to, get a little digestion on this.
Yeah, I mean, Jen's not putting any pressure on you, and again, September's not magic, I mean, we can pass in October, 2nd September, anything you want. We just know what you want, let's bring it back. I mean, we're not asking you to do anything tonight, you can't do anything because we're on an agenda. We just want feedback on what you want to see, or nothing too. I mean, that, you know, again, they're about $200,000 a year. I mean, that, in a $87 million budget, that's not a ton. But also, $200,000 a year in those 5 prime years, so it's worth talking about it too.
$2 million of interest we're not paying, which is
I'd like to see your proposal.
What piqued my interest is when you said that we may be able to apply in the future to pay those down more rapidly. That's always something I really wanted to do since we extended that out the first time.
Yeah, I mean, you look at it that way, right? And then the 200,000, when we start looking at 34, 35, 36, right? Because again, once we pay those 2 bubbles off, our debt rate plummets. It goes from we're paying 8 to about 5, right? So the amount of money we're levying for debt, after we pay that off, goes down by $2 million.
Now, I have a question on that.
Yeah.
Would it be possible for us to levy the same amount and pay those off? I mean,
Pay it out. We can't pay those other years off until 30, right?
Correct. So in order to do a tax exempt restructuring of those payments, The next opportunity would be 2030.
You can do whatever you want. I mean, we can run the, power whichever way you want to do it, where the time comes back.
Right, that would be, my, scenarios,
But even what Jeff talked about today, if it goes, 34, 35, 36, hopefully we can run more than that in 30, but at least at 200,000, you can start in those out years saving it.
My concern on it is that we jump in on something and then, it's whatever economist's thinking. Your economist thinking someday it's going to go up and someday it's going to go down. But the rates don't continue to stay where they are, and they're going to start to drop. And we'll be locked in at rates that are based upon numbers that aren't there. And I don't want to see us get so far into this that we've now found ourselves to rates that are potentially historically high and are not going to stay there forever. The other thing I'm concerned about as a board member is I don't want to see that 2037 extend any further out than this. I don't want to add any new debt than we have to. And I'd like to see, as you pointed out there, to see that little bump in a couple of years, in several years, jump back, get back down to a level where we're not having to look at it and say, well, we've been paying, we had $5 million in debt. Now all of a sudden we've got $8, and we got to come up with it again. And I would like to see if there's a way to level that out. I think that's beneficial to us, and that sounds like what you're proposing doing. It also sounds like we're only talking about one series of bonds. The risk of having doing this with one series of bonds as opposed to doing it with all our series of bonds is a lot, is hedged a little bit. So I kind of like what you're saying. As Dr. Ferris has pointed out, it's the first time we've seen it, so it's trying to absorb a little bit is hard, but I like what you're saying. I personally would like to see some kind of a plan at least on what you're talking about in terms of what's going on before our next meeting, for at least for consideration. That's my thought. Yeah, I'll propose or something.
So just taking one step farther, would you like to see what Jen's proposing, or would you like us to come up with a number more aggressive? Like that's kind of what I heard you say too. I don't know which way you want to go, because we could go after and just try to hit when if the rates do come back favorably. Or just take what Jen asked us to do now.
I'm not sure what you're saying. I was not being more aggressive.
Well, I thought what you were saying is you don't want to lock in when the rate's too high, right? I mean, the other thing is you could do a parameters resolution that just says, okay, we're only going to lock in if there's 300,000, 350,000, the rate gets to a certain point to capture that. So it's whatever you want, we'll do. I'm not sure that's the right thing to do. I just want to make sure we put all the options out there.
Again, it's correct though. We'd have to do a parameters resolution no matter what, because it gives us an idea as far as what the board wants expectation-wise. So,
Yeah, but the parameters are important. Like if we do exactly what Jen's telling us now, and the parameters are, the levels we talked about for the savings are about 200,000 a year. If we were afraid of locking in at the rate that high, we could be more aggressive. We may not hit it, but that's the angle.
The only issue with that is we can only execute if that authority is met in that parameters resolution. So I say that because if you were to tell me you like you'd be comfortable with what you see today but nothing lower, then we don't have the authority to accept a sale that gets us 1.8 million savings. It would have to be 1.88. So generally, we would recommend a lower threshold than what you're seeing, just in case rates continue to move the wrong direction. Unless you're telling me, no way, if it's under 1.8 million, we're out. Totally fine, that's your call. But I just want you to know that is a rigid parameter. And if you were to change your mind and say, okay, well now rates are, 25 basis points higher than when we spoke in August. Now it looks like they're not coming down anytime soon. We'd be comfortable with something lower. We would have to approve the new parameters.
I would like to see a resolution along lines of what you just said and what you're recommending. I want to make sure that I understand your answer to my question earlier. Basically, in terms of timing, we didn't do this now because we're saving over the course of years. If we didn't do this now, rates would have to come down a lot to get the same savings doing it later.
Once you pass January.
That's once you pass.
Yeah, I guess I thought it was between September and December, right? If you want to do that.
Yeah, and I think well, with parameters, if they do go down, yeah, of course you're doing it. You know,
The way the parameters are going to be set, we're going to hit what she's telling us today, which is not a great rate. I mean, historically, right? So, and when we take the savings and go, or if you wanted to say we only want to do it at, you know, that's not Jen's fault. That's like, I mean, Jen does a great job, but we're being honest, right? That's not a great historical rate. You know, we could also be more aggressive and say, hey, we hold on until we get, you know, X if we wanted to. But if you don't, you have to still have different options.
Yeah, I think that would just be us guessing that rates are going to.
It's 100%. That's 100%. It's a gamble. That's what it is. Absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
So we're good.
We're great. 100%.
Is there a particular level of savings you wanted to discuss, or I mean, we can get back to that?
I think what you talked about, right? Another thing.
Yes.
Which is that? 1.8? 1.8. I don't know, we want to consider 1.5?
Yes.
Yeah, I'll take any savings. I don't feel like there's a reason to not take it, because we're really taking a risk the closer we get to June.
Yeah, I think also we want to make sure, see how the market's heading when we have a conversation, right? Because, I mean, I'm not an economist, I don't really follow it, but, you know, people are talking about it. You know, again, we're not, everyone says that we're not getting a great rate, right? So there's a chance of getting a great rate if we get closer to that conversation too.
We could pass them without any parameters at all, right? And in terms of savings parameters, we could pass them and says, we just want to refund them.
No, if you
We would have to put some minimum amounts on. Council would want to see some threshold. We could set it very low. You know, we could say you want your present value savings at 3%. You know, right now it's 7.75, so that's much lower. But we could do something like that that gives you a lot of flexibility. But
Could we set the parameters at that minimal, and then we can decide down the road if we want to go that route? And
So
we could, but I'm saying, because for the purposes of our discussion, could we say, here's our proposed parameters, and say, here's the minimum amount that you have in order to save, and then we as a board, when we vote on this, could decide to raise that parameters to say, we could vote on 1.5 million or 1.89 million when we actually do the vote. In other words, not depending on what the conditions are in a month when we're back here, or 2 weeks whenever we're back here, we can get some advice as to where the what's going on with the Fed. And
you can change it on that night when you vote. You can change the parameter however you want. Just I think throw out clear. Once you pass it though, it gets to a point. PMA's got to sell it,
right.
And we're going to be done.
And I would add that if we set it, you know, at a lower bound threshold, that doesn't mean that I will go do whatever I want. The delegates still have to approve, you know, the level it's at. Just because it meets your minimum savings threshold doesn't mean that has to be approved by the delegates either. So you can tell me a different target than what's in the parameters, and you know, between administration and myself on the day of the bond sale, if it's very, very close but just under, you know, we can execute that because the parameters resolution would allow it.
Not with our staff. That puts our staff at risk, I think, eventually. I think whenever you know, I want
I guess what I mean is the difference between
whatever
1.81 and 1.8 even, you know.
But I'm hoping what you're saying, Jen, is that even if we had a low threshold, you're still working to try and get us the most savings we can. That's what
Exactly, and whatever your real target is, you know, that you tell us. What I mean is if we're a basis point short of it or $1 short of the absolute minimum savings, we're not legally, you know, tied. We could still, it's what is in that parameters resolution that we absolutely have to attain, but we can set our expectation, our goal higher than that, of course.
So in other words, we set a minimum, but she's actually looking for, if we said, you know, 1.5, she's actually looking for 1.7 or something like that. That's kind of a goal, but our minimum would be 1.5, just an example.
Right. So, and we do need a little bit of a heads up in order to access the market. You know, the district's offering document would need to be prepared, which we can do between now and September just so that we're ready to go when you say we should. But it, you know, it isn't necessarily something where we can find out the day before that we want to enter the market the next day. So there is some preparation that we have to do on our end, but there's no cost incurred until we, you know, meet with the rating agency.
So we'll have a parameter resolution ready for its next meeting, and you can finalize it there, what it's there. And if you have questions between now and then, let me know when I'll ask. We'll get you any information.
Will you be here at that meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Well said.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you so much for coming, for being your patience and answering probably somewhat repetitive questions at times. Thank you. Okay, our next item on our agenda is the placement of the tentative 2023-2024 budget on public display and establishment of a public hearing date.
Okay, thank you. Let the finance fund continue. You should all have a hard copy of this so you can take a look at it. Just to kind of give you the background on the budget process is kind of a year-round process. We start looking at this in November when we start looking at the levy, which affects the next year's budget, and start pulling budget numbers in December. It's a long-term process. In fact, you probably remember in December we sit down and we look at the parameters for establishing the budget. So to that end, just to give you some recollection of the parameters that we decided that we would have a balanced budget with the exception of a couple items. One is the abatement that we just talked about with Jen, and the other is we've got some capital expenditures, and we'll go through that in a minute. We also made the assumption that our EAV would only increase a small amount. Well, in fact, it actually went up about 8.8%. With our levy, we continued to decrease our tax rate. We were at 6.49%. We had assumptions about 6.36. We actually went down to 6.067. Our local revenue collection rate was 99.5%. Our student enrollment we assumed would be around about 6,132. And we expected our EBF, evidence-based funding, which is the state funding, to pretty much remain flat. And in fact, it was a little bit higher, which was a nice thing. We also assumed that our health insurance premiums would increase about 6%. So, to give you my favorite way to go through the budget is if you look at page 14 in your hard copy, you'll see a schedule that's the all funds combined, which is kind of a snapshot of the budget for every single one of our operating funds, or every single one of our funds. And what I'd like to do is just kind of, walk you through a couple of the important ones, and then we can, dance around a little bit. The first one I like to look at is the education fund, because that is by far the largest fund, and it pretty much addresses everything that we do in the district. You'll notice that our revenues are $74,285,000. The bulk of that comes from our local revenues, which is about $50,000. And if you're following along, it's in the column that's on the far right, or far left of the page. You'll also notice our salaries and benefits. Those have gone up a little bit because we've got a contractual obligation for our unions, and we've also made some adjustments through the year to retain some of our associates, things like that. So that's reflected in there. We also have some purchase services, materials and supplies. The bulk of some of those are for our technology. We've done we're planning to do some big things with technology. Also, you'll see that our tuition, we've had some higher tuition bills, but we also get reimbursement for a bulk of that as well. So what you'll see at the bottom line is that our revenues are over our expenditures slightly, about $40,977. Typically, that's pretty close to balance, but right below that, you're going to see a line that says transfers out for $4,250,000. That is for our debt. Okay, that's what we're transferring out of the fund balance from the ed fund over into the debt fund to make our debt service payments. Okay, so that brings us down to a beginning, or our ending fund balance is actually about $52 million. Looking on to the next operating fund, if you look over about 5 lines, you're going to see the operation and maintenance fund. That's Fund 20. And you'll see that that is a balanced budget. We've got revenues of $9 million and expenses of $9 million, so we're right on target there. However, looking down at the bottom again, you're going to see another transfer out for $3.2 million. That is for our solar field, which we approved at the last meeting.
Can we anticipate getting that back?
Yep.
Not in this fiscal year, but the next 2 fiscal years.
We definitely do. We expect to see credits from the federal as well as state and ComEd. So, but we'll see that over time. It's not factored into this budget. And a question that came up earlier was, well, when we do receive those back, where would that go? That would go back into the O&M fund. Okay. The next one over to the right from that is the debt service fund. This is what we just talked about with Jen. You can see that our debt service fund, if you look down in the middle of the page, our total revenues are $8.5 million, but a little bit further down, you're going to see total expenditures of $13 million. So you can see where our revenues don't equal our expenditures, so we're short by about, well, 4.5 million. That's where those transfers are gonna come into play. We're gonna pull out 4.25 from education, and we're gonna pick up another 256,000 from the Developer Impact Fund. And that makes sense. The Developer Impact Fund is what we get impact fees from the City of Woodstock as well as City of Wonder Lake, or Village of Wonder Lake. And it makes sense that those impact fees are acquired as a result of developing the, building in the areas, and those support or those utilize the schools that we build. So it makes sense those impact fees would support our debt service payments. Okay. Looking over just to the right of that in the Trans Fund, Fund 40, that would be all of our buses. You can see we do get local revenues from property taxes, but we also get general state aid, which is our transportation claim, which we just filed. Actually, it was due today, but we just filed, and we'll get quarterly payments from the state as reimbursement for our transportation. But you'll notice again, this one isn't totally balanced because our revenues are 4.476, but our expenditures are about 7 million. And the difference there is two things. One is we've got about 867,000 to buy buses, and we already bought 7 of them, and you guys approved it back in May, but you'll see another agenda item coming up shortly is 3 more buses. So we'll have a total of 10 buses that we brought in.
And we talked about the finance committee today too. It kind of mentioned as well, because 10 new buses puts the fleet in a really good spot. The next 2 years, we're going to pay off those big debt payments, which we would really like to do. We don't necessarily buy buses. I think we might be okay 1 year for sure, if not 2, being able to sit with the fleet the way it is and get by while we make those huge debt payments that are coming up.
Right. The other plan was with the Trans Fund, and I don't know if you recall, but over the past 4 or 5 years, we've been trying to slowly utilize some of that fund balance because our fund balance runs pretty high, and we tend to build up the surplus. So that's why there's a little bit of excess beyond what we've got in the buses there. Okay. The next 2 funds, IMRF and Social Security, are pretty much a factor of payroll. It's what we use to pay those liabilities. Fund 60, the Capital Project Fund, there's a couple of things in there. There's the solar field, the 3.2 million in there, but there's another 50,000 in there, actually 100,000, that will cover HVAC over at Northwood Middle School. We got that through a grant, so we'll use that in our capital projects fund. Okay. Talked about the Developer Impact Fund, that's revenues from the City of Woodstock and Village of Wonder Lake that we'll use to fund our debt service. Working cash, Fund 70 is pretty much, it's our safety net. We levy a little bit and we never touch it. Fund 80, the Tort Immunity Fund, that is what we use to pay for our collective liability insurance cooperative. We've already paid it this year. You probably saw it. You noticed a huge payment in the July payments, close to $1 million, and it'll cover us for the entire year for our property, casualty, workers' comp. Again, that's another thing. It's not required that we have that fund, and when you look at it, when we look at it as far as our percentage of fund balances, we combine that with the ed fund, but it's nice for us to see it separately. Okay. And then finally, Fund 90, our Health, Life, Safety Fund. We have had, and you probably recall this as well because you approved the work on it. We've had some big projects going on this summer that are funded through this Health, Life, Safety Fund. And we're still waiting for some of the bills to come in. Some of them have already started to trickle in, but they'll be covered by Health, Life, Safety, which would be, for example, the showers over at Woodstock North, the patio out there, the 3rd and 4th floor at Woodstock High. So there's been a lot of things going on, and we'll see that dwindle down little by little. So essentially, when you look at our overall budget for all funds included, our total revenues in this proposal for FY24 is $117,867,000. The revenues or the expenses are higher. They're $126,743. So we're showing a total deficit of $808,876,000, but that is due to primarily 3 big things. One is the debt service payments, which we're going to abate. The $3.2 million for the solar, which we're going to pull out of our Fund 20 fund balance, and then our transportation fund. We've got the buses for $867, and then we've got a little bit digging into that fund balance there, which we've tried to bring down little by little in the past 4 or 5 years. So when you look at this book, it's got this schedule, which I look at this all the time, but it's also got a lot of detail behind it. When you look back at each of the funds, there's also a chart, and then there's some trend information that shows you what we've done with the actual as well as what we're budgeting. So that's another good, it's another good way to look at things, because you can look at budget over budget, but budget's done once you've approved it, we're living it. So it's much better to look at actuals versus budget, which is what I try to do with these trends. The other things that I think are helpful in this tentative budget is when you look back, you can kind of look at some of the information as far as our evidence-based funding. There's some trend information in there, as well as like CPPRT, which Dr. Ferris asked me a couple minutes ago. He said, what the heck is going on with CPPRT? Last year we had a really good year. CPPRT, if you don't remember, is Corporate Personal Property Replacement Tax. And it's really a factor of the state of Illinois. It's a tax that was implemented in the late 60s, and it was just kind of to make up for the fact that in a lot of cases, property tax wasn't paid by some small businesses. So they established this tax. And it's really a factor of the economy. So given the fact that our economy was doing really well last year, we reaped the benefits of that. We got over $2.5 million in CPPRT. Well, it's starting to change a little bit, so we're expecting that to go down. But this schedule back on in one of the last pages of your booklet kind of gives you a trend as far as what we've been doing with that. So it was a nice year last year. I'm hoping we still kind of reap some benefits of that, but we'll see. Hard to predict. And then finally, the very last page gives you an idea on historical CPI. Again, you can look at the last 2 years, and it was kind of crazy, but hopefully we're going to see that go down a little bit. But this is our tentative budget. I don't expect anything major to change after what you've seen tonight. Do you have any questions, anything specific that you'd like to understand a little bit better?
Do you have any questions or comments or concerns regarding the tentative budget?
If you're in agreement with it, what'll happen next is I'll ask you to propose a motion, and then what we'll do is we'll publish notice in the Independent next Wednesday, and we'll make sure that there's copies available for the public to look at, and we'll have a public hearing at our last meeting in September and approve this budget to move forward next year.
If there are no more questions or comments or any concerns, but I suggest a motion on page 125 and 125.
Move to approve the tentative 2023-2024 budget and waive the reading of and approve the resolution to establish a budget hearing date and place the tentative budget on public display.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Parisi, seconded by Dr. Bidwell. Roll call, please.
Mr. Parisi?
Yes.
Dr. Bidwell?
Yes.
Mr. Headley?
Yes.
Mr. Homo?
Yes.
Dr. Ferris?
Yes.
Mr. Gilmore?
Yes.
Thank you.
Don't go away, because you get the next
I just
one.
want to thank Julie on the work on the budget too. It's a big deal for her. She's put a lot of her time. She did a great job again, so thank you, Julie, for her.
Okay, the next item of new business is approval of the bus purchase.
This we just talked about a couple minutes ago. It's included in our budget. Again, Midwest Transport, they came up with 3 more buses that are 2020s. They're exactly like the ones that we approved back in May, that you approved back in May. There were 7 of them at that point. So this would give us 10 total new buses this year. And these are 2020s. They're regular gas, they low mileage. They all have the Scion 4-camera system. And we're hoping this will help us update our fleet a little bit more. I also included a chart on your worksheet, so you can kind of get an idea as far as where we are age-wise with our fleet with the addition of these buses. Any questions on that one?
These buses will all be greater than 2006?
These are all 2020s.
Okay. So we're going to be replacing the 2026 ones with the 2006?
Yeah, in fact, in your consent agenda, you can see that the majority of the ones that were being retired, there were 11 of them. The bulk of them were 2006s. We'll have a few that are left, but not many, about 4 of them that are 2006.
Okay. So we're fine. There's a suggested motion on the agenda. I need one.
Move to approve the purchase of 3 new buses from Midwest Transit Equipment for a total purchase price of $224,979 with expected delivery in fall 2023. I second.
Motion by Mr. Homo, seconded by Dr. Ferris. Roll call, please.
Mr. Homo?
Yes.
Dr. Ferris?
Yes.
Dr. Bidwell?
Yes.
Mr. Parisi?
Yeah.
Mr. Headley?
Yes.
Mr. Gilmore?
Yes. Okay, the next item on our agenda is the approval of the parallel master services agreement.
It's come at the request of Lisa Pearson, our special education department. We worked hard, since December, January to recruit staff. However, we currently are a reopened school short 2 full-time speech language pathologists and 1 school psychologist. what we're gonna have to do is, go out and contract with a third party that'll provide those services to our students for this school year, contract for the whole school year. We need these to get the minutes that we're required to the wish we didn't have to do it. Wish we had staff, but these are really hard to find positions, becoming even harder. And this is the situation we're in today. We will start recruiting again. We will in December, January, we'll be out to recruit. Dr. Michelle, she has some ideas too, but we can things we can try recruiting one. We'll try to do a better job or different job than as well, more forward. Wish we weren't in the situation, but we are.
Any questions or concerns? Comments?
Is this indicative, when you're saying across, that our districts have difficulty with that? I'm assuming it's true for other districts as well.
It is, and this, I sort of saw it earlier in the conversation. I have a niece in the speech language pathology program. Marquette's really good school. Their 5-year program, they take like 6 kids. And then their 6-year program, they get 25. And the programs are really small, they're hard, so they're not producing the staff needed to fill the need. So yeah, this is very common, unfortunately. I think there's some statewide issues we're trying to talk about that, that's such a large macro issue. We are a small part of that conversation.
Okay, any other questions, comments, or concerns? There's a suggested vote motion on page 190 of your materials.
Move to approve the agreement with Parallel Learning Behavioral Health for a minimum contract amount of $278,710 from August 23rd through May 24th.
Motion by Mr. Headley. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Holland. Roll call, please.
Mr. Headley?
Yes.
Mr. Homo?
Yes.
Mr. Parisi?
Yes.
Dr. Ferris?
Yes.
Dr. Bidwell?
Yes.
Mr. Gilmore?
Yes. Next item on our agenda is the new strategic plan goals presentation.
Absolutely. So, new plan, new year. We've brought the goals and then the indicators back. We've added some throughout the plan to kind of indicate what we felt the committee gave us when we went back and did that. Remember, this is a multi-step process. So you have today to look at any changes you want. We'll bring it back again at the first September meeting, so you can look at it again, another draft, then ask you to approve it at the second September meeting. We're looking for any feedback, questions, comments, and we'll take them between now and then, the next meeting, wherever you want to leave them.
Does anybody have any questions, comments, concerns regarding the strategic plan goals? I have one question. On goal 4, exemplary employees, that's on page 214.
Sure.
What is a micro-credential? What is that?
We're really excited. Keith and I are excited about that. So this is a movement we've been trying to get going. And so the concept here is, we pay a lot, you look at the tuition payment, we pay a lot of people to go back to college, right, and take more classes. Sometimes that's very valuable education. Sometimes, if they're taking classes, and maybe they get, great knowledge out there they don't. Micro-credentialing is doing our own programs. Actually, Jackie Trask does a great job for us. She's our literacy director. She'll teach a class on letters, right, which is our pilot program. So then our teachers take that and they get a credential, a micro-credential, which we get more credit for, typically. And then they're learning and going in we're not paying anything out, which is a plus. And we'll give them lane credit potentially. And they'll get the information we really want them to have, because our program, our math program, our reading program, the high school, we can look at middle school literacy, middle school math, high school strategies over time. So it's taking our internal information, our people teaching it, and allowing them to, get credit towards what we want them to really learn and grow in.
Okay.
We really want to do this for a while. It's really hard. So they want to do it like, okay, let's come off your plate. But so we want to bring you a plan at least this year so we can start talking about it, because we're really excited about it. Everyone will tell you that there's things we really want our staff to have from us, over the summer or night, whatever they have. We think it would be beneficial for everybody.
And do you think the staff will be receptive to want to take these classes? Or
Well, I think it's got to be collaborative too, right, Sean? We're just kind of what they want. But I know when we've done letters training, we've got great results, math, stuff like that. But we have to meet them halfway too to have a thing that they really want to learn about. Because they're not going to get anywhere. It's going to be, they're going to vote with their feet and know what they want to do. So we're going to have to meet them halfway for sure. Yeah. And the quality of instruction, right? If they take one, and they find it, high quality, it's engaging, do a really good job, and people are going to take them, and it's going to grow that way too.
I kind of dabbled in it last year with our dual language staff, and we had different sessions and they could participate in them. And so it would be structured very similar to that. We had great participation, but they were coming on their own.
Do you feel we have the staff that are going to be the quality people we need to make people want to come to these? Because
right.
That's critical.
I think sometimes they like learn from each other. Right? I mean, sometimes, you know who our best, our teachers know who our best teachers are. To know that, Melanie Myers would teach a literacy, middle school literacy session, right, on writing. Sure. Well, our teachers don't want to that. They know she did a good job, high quality, things like that. So I think using our own people is a great benefit to that too.
And they learn, when teachers do that, when they're instructing, they learn so much, right, when they're instructing their peers. And so I think it just makes them better teachers and teacher leaders, right, when they're doing things like that.
Any other comments or concerns regarding or questions regarding the strategic plan goals?
So this is not here for a vote tonight, it's for us to review and to go over and
then we'll bring the next draft back to the same thing, the first September meeting. If you have anything between now and then, shoot me an email or call, wherever you want, we can make changes for the next draft then as well.
All right then, if nothing else, we'll move on to our last item, which is the K-5 sustainability discussion.
All right, here we go. In our last meeting, we decided that we're going to consider the world sustainability pretty quick. So we met with, talked to all the elementary principals and Tricia and our staff with food service. And then what we've come up with really is a plan that, well, we're going to tell you right away that as of tomorrow, we will not have single-use plastic water bottles being distributed by the school. So I think that was the main goal here for the board, and we feel comfortable we can do that. Really know what it is. In all honesty, it's probably low-hanging fruit. We were doing it to start with, but it was a good goal to start, and we got it. So, and we're doing it, the only maybe a little years in, they pour water in the little plastic cups, which actually, I'm not sure how reliable things are when you Google, but the plastic water bottles you can recycle. The little plastic cups, I don't think you can recycle very well. So we're going with plastic cups with beers in them, they're going to wash. That was the only minor cost. That's the only minor cost we would put into it. Everything else is just kind of existing resources that we have going forward. So I think that met the goal of the board. We want to bring a couple other things, so I do want your feedback on this. One, when we serve lunch, we use single-use plastic cups for fruit and things like that. Juice comes that way. Salad containers. So there are other things we are using. And getting away from those is a bigger issue because the single serving cup is how we serve them to kids. So to do that, we have to have a longer conversation, increase cost, then pass it on at some point. We've already had, so I don't know how quickly we can do that, or we can kick it to the sustainability committee if you want. Have board membership too, and then also like we sell pop and vending machines, the plastic. I mean, I don't know how people want to get on this, but I don't want to take low hanging fruit and then duck out of it. So I just want to have a conversation of what else we want to see us do now, and then what else we just send to the committee. The committee will report back to them.
Well, definitely, I would like to see the single-use plastic serving of food or whatever else gone.
That's going to be a bigger deal, though. Just
I understand. I'm not saying it's food tomorrow, but we've done this. I've had it for 35 years. We never ever sold that before. It was always sold served on a reusable tray and placed on it. And it can be done. It's just that we have to prioritize that as a district at some point. It will take time. And I grant you that, that's for sure. But we do need to move that direction. We can't just, like you just said, low-hanging fruit and doing the plastic water bottles. That's step one. I think many steps that we have to take if we're really going to be serious about sustainability.
Anything else?
Yeah, I asked Mike earlier, I said, so does that mean when I go to the next football game, I won't buy out any bottled water? Single-use water?
Well, not currently, because we only do educate on it.
Right. But I mean, I'm just saying, I'm wondering, are we making a big deal out of starting at K-5 when it might be a bigger deal to go aimed somewhere else.
I think the conversation we had last time was to, let's get this off the ground and start moving forward, and then we'll add to it as time, as we see it successful and continue to expand upon it. But Michael had suggested that, and I agreed that maybe we should just, let's get something rolling. Let's make something happen. And then if that works, then we'll go to that next step. 'Cause you know where I'm coming from. I definitely want to do that too. I think you're right.
Well, what I'm getting at is this the right place to start for us? I mean, is it, Mike says, feasible, we can do this?
Yeah, I mean, I've talked to friends, I'm now concerned about the single-use water bottles in elementary schools. Now, the little trays, that's a bigger conversation, right? The little cups, and that's where we're back. How we want to bring back more information to the board, there's an increased cost there. And I want to understand it better before we make a decision on that. So like when we serve fruit, we serve in little plastic cups. Yeah, or we get juice in a little plastic cup.
I lost which
sorry.
item we were talking about.
And actually, like salads, we do that. The more I research it, the salad was actually worse. You can't accept that.
But we've done it in the past where we've been able to do those things reasonable, and so it is a very reasonable, plausible recommendation. I don't want to make it sound like this is something that's going to be very difficult to do, because we've done it before. I know we can do it again, and I want to take more of it.
That is more, just so we're off the list, it is more difficult than just taking the bottles away.
Oh, and I agree with you on that. I agree with that, but I want us to think that this is the first step of several steps that we're going to pursue to make this district more sustainable when it comes to environmental issues.
Anybody else that have any thoughts? And I think what we're trying to do at this point was to take the first step on our way to Rome. And I think that we've accomplished that. The question is, what do we do? How much do we expand it? Can we expand it? What's the feasibility of expanding it? And what other options, what other things can we do that don't necessarily have to do with food service? Do they have other things to do with that? I mean, one of the things we were talking about, for example, is we were talking about the recycling receptacles that we put out by our provider. I didn't look around today to see if they were what we thought they were going to be, but then I went to check to see if they were what they said they were going to do. They're out?
They're out. We received, when they delivered all our new dumpsters, and they also delivered folks for rebuilding for common areas.
Okay. So, I suggest maybe perhaps the next step would be to refer it further to the Sustainability Committee to determine what they want to determine, what kind of questions they would want to ask and what kind of things they want to look at doing, and then see if they're feasible options. I put the principals on the spot. Are there other areas that you can see that we can work on this? I mean, not necessarily food, but anything else you can think of that might be something we could try and get the kids to be thinking about?
I think one thing we also realize, and I want to take away from them, but we're talking about changing behaviors, right? And that's only going to happen if we have staff buying it. I mean, that's because, principal's great, board's great, all that stuff. We can do water bottles and things like that, but to really change behavior, we have to have buy-in from our staff. And I don't know if it's there or not. I mean, I think it's why we have a committee, right, to see if people buy it. But I think kids would do your thing. We really need to keep buy-in to help change behaviors as far as recycling, paper and lunch, things like that. Anybody pipe in anything?
We do have a green team at Olson where students walk around and collect the paper recycling bins from classrooms at the end of the day. So I do think that kids and staff, are definitely, they've bought into recycling paper. So I think we're probably in a good place with paper products.
Thank you for speaking up. All right, well, Sustainability Committee can take a
solar thing's pretty good. We've gotten rid of some plastics and recycling bins are out, and that's pretty good for 2 months.
I like it.
So we're in the right direction. Can't try to do it all at once, so that's where we are. All right.
Anything else in that topic?
All right, that's all our new business. Have any committees met, or do any committees have any reports since our last board meeting? Okay, not, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. So moved.
Second.
Motion by Dr. Ferris, seconded by Dr. Bidwell. Roll call, please.
Dr. Ferris?
Yes.
Dr. Bidwell?
Yes.
Mr. Parisi?
Yes.
Mr. Homewood?
Jake?
Mr. Homewood?
Yes.
Mr. Gilmore?
Yes.
Send the training committee.